Hey guys, it's Chris at Highline Guitars, and you're watching another episode of From the Luthier's Workbench. Right now, what I'm doing is I am lightly level sanding some grain filler that I applied to this guitar, and I'm doing it in the basement because normally I would do this out in the shop, but I'm going to be spraying probably 10 coats of water-based clear a little bit later on, probably as soon as I finish shooting this video. And whenever I do that, I like to keep that dust level really low in the area where I'm going to be spraying. So I'll do it down here. And it doesn't really produce a lot of dust. However, I just like to take that precaution before I start shooting clear. And what I wanted to talk about in this episode was I want to follow up some of the topics that I discussed in the last several videos. There have been a couple of questions that have been repeated over the last week or two, and normally I don't do videos where I answer viewers' questions. Instead, I prefer to reply to their questions either when they post to my YouTube channel or my email or my Highline Guitars Facebook page, wherever it is they happen to post the question. I just usually respond right there. But I got the same couple of questions several times, and I thought, if those questions are being repeated, I'm sure there are a lot of people out there who are thinking the same thing but not necessarily asking it. So I thought I would just go ahead and make this week's video kind of a follow-up to some of those issues. And if you'll remember last episode, I talked about some techniques that you can use to avoid some of the common pitfalls of applying water-based poly and acrylic clear coat lacquers. And those two common problems are orange peel and that weird milky bluish haze that can form when you apply the stuff too heavily. One of the things that I neglected to mention, however, was the product that I'm actually using right now, which I prefer and tends to avoid those problems altogether. And I meant to bring that up at the end of that video, and I just forgot to do it because my videos are, as you can tell, they're ad lib and there's no script. So several people called me out on this and asked me if I had changed the brand of products that I'm using. And the answer is no. I was just using those products specifically for that video last week just to kind of use them as an example. But what I was using in that video was this General Finishes Enduro water-based pre-cat lacquer. And the reason I was using this was because about 9 months to a year ago, I learned about this product and saw it on the internet, and it was at a price that I couldn't refuse. It was like $25 for a gallon, and that's a pretty good price for a water-based clear coat. So I really thought, man, if this stuff works, I can use a gallon to clear coat, up to 10 guitars. So I bought it, and it performed pretty much the same way as all the other water-based clear coats that I've used, whether they're poly or acrylic. It would spray down fairly nicely, but there was always that orange peel, and then there was that milky blue haze if I happened to spray it a little bit too heavily. So you have to I had to really be conscientious about my technique, and that's what I explained in the video last week, was some things that you can do. And I actually learned some of those things trying to figure out how to spray this stuff nice and smooth. But the problem was with that particular product is I had horrific fish eyes. And fish eyes is another problem that can occur in any kind of finish, whether it's water-based or solvent. And the challenge can be to try to figure out exactly what was causing those fish eyes. And I tried everything. I tried I was spraying over a water-based dye. I tried spraying over stains. I tried spraying it over bare wood. I tried different spray guns, different. I used my HVLP turbine. I used a compressor. Everything I tried, nothing seemed to solve the problem of the fish eyes. And I even contacted General Finishes and asked them, and they didn't really have an answer to that would solve the problem. So I stuck that stuff on the shelf and decided, you know, it was a nice effort, but it wasn't going to work. So at that point, I had heard about from a viewer who told me about a product from Crystalac, and the product is called Brite Tone. And I've talked about this in other videos in the past. I think it was episode 61. I talked about spraying Brite Tone and how much I like the product. And that was the question that came up in the last week. Was people had seen that I was using that General Finishes product and wondered if all of a sudden I decided I didn't like the Brite Tone from Crystalac anymore. And the truth is, I still think that is the absolute standard by which all water-based finishes should be judged. And that's what I use when I do my clear coats. But I know that a lot of other people like me have tried all these other different products and are trying to figure out how to get them to work. So that's why I shot that video. But what I meant to do at the end of that episode was to say, if you want to avoid orange peel and that milky blue haze, just use Crystalac Brite Tone, because it doesn't have any of those problems. It sprays down nice and smooth, dries crystal clear, no bluish, milky blue haze at all. And it produces a surface that has, I find it's a higher solids product, so it produces a slightly harder finish, which is much more resistant to scuffs and scratches. And that, for me, is important during the assembly phase, because that's when you can kind of put little scratches in the surface as you're putting a guitar together. It seems like no matter how cautious you are, there's always going to be those little scratches. And once you've got your pickups and your bridge and all your knobs and strings on, it's really hard to go in and polish the entire surface of the guitar. So I like to have a clear coat that's more durable, and that's what I get using the Crystalac Brite Tone. I also use, like for example, I put a sanding sealer on this, and I used Crystalac sanding sealer. This is a great product. It seals the wood, so regardless of whether you're using a water-based dye or stain or paint or whatever, or a solvent-based or oil-based, you can apply that sanding sealer over the top of it once those products are dry, and it does a really nice job of sealing them in without dramatically altering the tone of the wood that you've finished. And it does have a very slight kind of an amber tint. I don't know if you can see that, but it does have a slight amber tint to it. So it actually looks really great by itself over bare wood. It kind of warms up the grain a little bit and makes it stand out. And then I'm using Crystalac's grain filler over the top to fill the last little bit of pores on this walnut. And I'm going to sand that smooth. And then I'll put down probably about 10 coats of the Brite Tone over the top of it. And I don't have any Brite Tone down here because I've already got it up in the shop. I poured it into the gun and getting ready to spray it as soon as I get this level. But then from that point, I can let it cure for, about, I think it's like 5 to 7 days. And then I'll just level it out with some 800 grit sandpaper, and then hit it with probably some 1500 and then 2000 or 1000 grit and 2000 grit Mirka Abralon pads. I'll sand it dry, and then I'll take it to my buffer and I'll buff it out. So yes, I'm still using Crystalac Brite Tone, and it's what I highly recommend. And I'll put a link down to their web store so you can go and check it out. Another question that came up, and this kind of shows how close people watch your videos when they subscribe to your channel. I had a couple of people ask if I had given up on Solar-Rez polyester UV cured resin. And The answer is no, I haven't. I still use it, but I'm using it a little bit differently than what I was using it in the past. And I was planning on doing a video on this eventually, but I'll give you kind of a teaser. I was using that product as my clear coat because it cures so hard that it just doesn't scratch. And you can handle it, the guitar, during assembly and whatever, and you won't put any scratches in it. It's just that durable. And everybody knows how hard and how durable polyester clear coats are. And the beauty of it is, you know, in the past when you would apply a polyester resin, you had to use special equipment to spray it on. You had to wear a hazmat suit, respirators, full face mask. Every inch of your body had to be covered because you couldn't let that stuff get on your skin or your hair or anything. And then you had to use a special UV wand to cure the finish after it was applied. And all this equipment was and still is really expensive. So it kind of pushed the idea of using polyester away from the small shop luthier and, you know, the hobbyists. So, but I found this product from Solar-Rez. They're a company that caters primarily to the surfboard industry, and this product is their Solar-Rez polyester gloss UV curable polyester resin. And the beauty of it is you don't need any of that special equipment. You just brush it on, you let it flow out and level. It takes about 30 minutes. Then you take it out into regular ordinary sun and hold it there under the sun for about 3 minutes, and it cures bone dry. And right at that point, you're ready to level sand and take it all the way up to your final grits and then polish it out. The problem, though, and some people wouldn't even consider this a problem. It really, you have to have a really good level sanding process where you have literally every grit available from 1500 up to about 2000. That's if you're machine buffing. The polyester resin is so hard when it's cured that you can't just start leveling it with like a 600 grit. You'll never get there. So you've got to back down to a coarser grit. And there were times when I was going back to 150 to get it level. Well, when you do that, you put so many scratches in the surface, and then trying to work your way up to a fine grit, everything looks great until you take it to the buffer, and then you'll see that there are still some of those deeper 150 grit scratches left, and it's a real chore to level it. And what I ended up doing was I decided to use the polyester resin, Solar-Rez polyester resin, as a way to quickly fill grain, but more importantly, make the surface of the wood harder. And I used it, for example, on the back of this guitar, which is alder. And alder, as you know, even though it's classified as a hardwood, it's kind of soft. And for that reason, it can dent and ding easily, and that can cause all sorts of problems with finishes. So what I did was I brushed on a layer of what I did was I used the Solar-Rez wood grain filler first, and I brushed on a coat of that, cured it in the sun for 60 seconds like the instructions say, and then went back and applied a coat of the polyester gloss resin, and then cured that for 3 minutes in the sun. Then I level sanded the whole thing out with 220 grit sandpaper, and now I applied the Solar-Rez or the Crystalac sanding sealer just to kind of provide a barrier. And now I'm going to apply, after I'm done sanding the grain filler, I'll apply the Crystalac Brite tone for the final clear coat. So what I end up getting is I get that polyester hardness on the softer wood, and then on top of that I get the much easier to sand and buff quality of the bright tone. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. I hope that makes sense. But those were the two questions that came up, and so hopefully this video will address those. And if you have any other questions, of course, post them down in the comments below, or send them to my Highline Guitars Facebook page, and I'll do my best to try to answer them for you. But I'm going to get back to sanding this, and I'm going to head out to the shop and start spraying my Crystalac Brite Tone gloss clear coats so I can get this guitar body finished. And so have a great day, and I will see you in the next episode.